Have you ever waited a long time for something you were promised? What does it mean to have faith in something you can't see or don't fully understand? How do you handle doubts when life doesn't go according to your plans? Have you ever tried to help a situation only to realize it complicated things further? Can changing your name or identity mark a fresh start or new purpose in life? Do you think patience is a virtue, or do you prefer to take matters into your own hands? What does it mean to be part of a bigger story or legacy, even if you can't see the end result? How do you respond when you receive a promise that seems impossible or far fetched? Today, we'll try to answer some of these questions by using the story of Abraham and Sarah in Genesis 15 through 17. It explores the concepts of faith, identity, doubt, legacy, and how to handle the unknown. There won't be a direct reading of these chapters. I'll give the overview of each chapter and summarize how each of these chapters go together. I'm not reading the chapters because I really feel you can find better sources for the actual readings. I really want you to read the Bible, but some people just don't have the opportunity to have their very own Bible. If this is you, comment in the section. What do you think? Should I read the actual verses where everyone gets to hear them, or are you really just wanting to know what it's about and how it applies to your own life? The applications, the practical benefits. Let me know. But for now, I'm going to try just giving you the overviews and sometimes how I feel about it, but mostly just a broad understanding for the practical and conceptual ideas. But first, I want to lay out a scenario that might hit a little closer to home. This story is really about Abraham and Sarah's point of view. But what if we look at it from a parent's point of view? Suppose you have a couple of children that are well behaved and do most of what you ask without question. You have big plans for them. They have been asking, say, for a treehouse, and you want them to have one because it'll help them with major skills, not treehouse building skills. Sure, those will come in handy someday, but patience and trust, that's what will really help them in the future. You get the kids together and you tell them, I have a wonderful plan for our family. Someday, we're going to build a beautiful treehouse together in our backyard, a place where we can have fun, make memories, and invite friends over. I promise, even if it seems hard or unlikely now, it will happen. All I ask is that you trust me, help where you can, and be patient. You know they won't be able to do it on their own, and you're committed to not only teach them, but supply the material that they need to make the very best treehouse. Not only the very best treehouse, but one so great other children in the neighborhood will also want one. You really want your children to see how great this treehouse is going to be. You want them to trust you and work with you, not just obey out of duty. You get busy with work and let them know it'll happen. They just need a little patience. At first, they'll seem excited, but as time passes and the treehouse isn't built yet, they're going to start doubting. They get impatient and try to build the treehouse themselves with sticks and cardboard, maybe even recruit a neighbor to help, thinking you need help. When you remind them of your promise, they might laugh or feel unsure. Are you sure this is going to happen? It just seems impossible. Yet deep down, they still hope and they want to believe. You know they'll probably decide to try to do it on their own. What you're hoping for is that your children trust your word, even when they can't see how it's going to work out. that they come to you with their doubts and questions rather than giving up or running off on their own plans. That in the end, the project brings you closer together, teaching them about trust, patience, and working as a family. Just as God offered Abraham and Sarah a future that seemed impossible, you offer your children good things, even if they sometimes struggle to trust or wait. Your hope is not just to give them something, but to build a relationship of trust and shared purpose, even through their doubts and mistakes. Being in God's shoes means offering love, promises, guidance, and inviting your children to trust even when it's hard for them. Their journey of faith, patience, and even their mistakes can deepen your relationship and reveal what you're truly able and willing to provide for them. Genesis 15 is a turning point in the book of Genesis, focusing on the deepening relationship between God and Abram, later called Abraham. The chapter opens with God appearing to Abraham in a vision, reassuring him with the words, "Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward." Despite God's promise, Abram expresses concern about his childlessness, pointing out that his servant Eleazar of Damascus stands to inherit his estate. God promises by promising Abram that he will indeed have a biological heir, saying, "This man will not be your heir, but a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir." He then takes Abram outside and invites him to look at the stars, declaring that his descendants will be as numerous as the stars. Abram believes God's promise, an act of faith that is credited to him as righteousness. God further reaffirms his covenant, reminding Abram that he brought him out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give him the land of Canaan. When Abram asks for assistance of this promise, God instructs him to prepare a special animal sacrifice. Abram obeys, and after the sun sets, he falls into a deep sleep and experiences a terrifying darkness. God reveals that Abram's descendants will be strangers in a foreign land, later understood as Egypt, where they will be enslaved for 400 years, but eventually freed with great possessions. The chapter concludes with a solemn covenant ritual. A smoking fire pot and a blazing torch pass between the animal pieces, symbolizing God's binding promise. God delineates the boundaries of the land promised to Abram's descendants, specifying the territories of various peoples. Genesis 15 thus marks the formal establishment of the Abrahamic covenant, highlighting themes of faith, promise, and divine assurance. Genesis 16 recounts the story of Sarai, later Sarah, Abram's wife, and Hagar, her Egyptian maidservant. Despite God's previous promises to Abram of numerous descendants, Sarai remains childless and becomes impatient with the delay. In the ancient Near Eastern context, it was customary for a barren wife to offer her maidservant to her husband as a surrogate. Acting on this custom, Sarai suggests that Abram have a child with Hagar to obtain an heir. Abram agrees, and Hagar conceives. Once Hagar realizes she's pregnant, tension arises between her and Sarai. Hagar begins to despise Sarai, leading to conflict and emotional distress. Sarai blames Abram for the situation, and Abram responds by giving Sarai permission to treat Hagar as she sees fit. Sarai mistreats Hagar and causing her to flee into the desert. While in the wilderness, Hagar encounters the angel of the Lord by a spring. The angel addresses her by name and asks about her situation. He instructs Hagar to return to Sarai and submit to her, but also delivers a remarkable promise. Hagar's descendants will be too numerous to count. The angel foretells that her son will be named Ishmael, meaning God hears, because the Lord has heard her misery. The angel further predicts that Ishmael will be a wild donkey of a man, living in conflict with his relatives. Hagar returns to Sarai and Abram, and soon gives birth to a son, whom Abram names Ishmael. Abram is 86 years old at this time. Genesis 16 highlights human impatience, the complexities of surrogate motherhood, God's compassion for the marginalized, and the origins of Ishmael, the ancestor of many Arab peoples. Genesis 17 marks a significant turning point in the relationship between God and Abram. At 99 years old, Abram receives a direct appearance from God, who introduces himself as God Almighty. God reaffirms and elaborates on his covenant with Abram, promising that he will be the ancestor of a multitude of nations. As a sign of this new phase of the relationship, God changes Abram's name to Abraham, meaning father of many, reflecting his future role as the patriarch of many nations. God also changes Sarai's name to Sarah, signifying that she too will play a crucial role in God's plan. He promises that Sarai will bear a son, even in her old age. And this son, Isaac, will be the child through whom the covenant promises will continue. Abraham expresses disbelief due to their advanced ages, but God insists that nothing is impossible for him. Remember that. A central feature of this chapter is the introduction of circumcision as a physical sign of the covenant. God commands that every male among Abraham's descendants, including servants and foreigners in his household, must be circumcised as a perpetual sign of belonging to the covenant community. Any uncircumcised male will be cut off from his people, emphasizing the seriousness of this requirement. Abraham faithfully obeys, circumcising himself, his son Ishmael, and all the males in his household that very day. Genesis 17 underscores themes of faith, obedience, and divine promise. It highlights God's power to fulfill his promises despite human limitations and introduces circumcision as a defining mark of the covenant people. The chapter sets the stage for the miraculous birth of Isaac and the ongoing unfolding of God's plan through Abraham's lineage. Genesis 15 through 17 traces an important journey in the lives of Abram and Sarai, ending in their renaming as Abraham and Sarah. God moves from making promises to establishing a binding covenant, marked by profound acts and symbols. The act of renaming is especially significant. In the ancient world, names were deeply connected to identity and destiny. By changing Abram's name to Abraham, father of many nations, and Sarai's to Sarah, princess or noblewoman, God publicly signals a new, divinely identity and future for them. This change is not merely cosmetic. It marks a fundamental shift in their roles within God's plan. No longer defined by their past limitations, Abram's childlessness, and Sarai's barrenness. They are instead defined by God's promises and purposes. Their new names affirm that their lives are now anchored in God's faithfulness and the extraordinary future He has prepared for them. The significance of this transformation extends beyond Abraham and Sarah. Their story invites people today to reflect on how God can redefine identity and purpose. Just as God saw potential and possibility in Abraham and Sarah, He sees it in each individual. Their journey demonstrates that human limitations or failures do not define a person's future. Rather, it's God's calling and promises that give true identity. The rite of circumcision, introduced as a sign of belonging to God's covenant, further emphasizes the importance of embracing God's call and participating in His community. Ultimately, Genesis 15 through 17 encourages you to trust in God's ability to bring about transformation, to embrace new beginnings, and to find identity and purpose not in past experiences, but in God's promises and the hope He offers for the future. Genesis 15, God promises Abram, later Abraham, countless descendants and land. Abram struggles with doubt, but God makes a covenant, reassuring him. Genesis 16, Sarah, and Abram, impatient for God's promise, agree that Abram should have a child with Hagar, Sarai's servant. This leads to conflict and distress. Genesis 17, God reiterates and formalizes the covenant, changing Abram's and Sarai's names to Abraham and Sarah, and institutes circumcision as a sign of the covenant. When facing uncertainty, starting a new project, a job, a change, a new house, anything, maintaining hope and perseverance despite unclear outcomes, define these long-term goals, even if the path isn't obvious. When challenges arise, recall your purpose and persist. Rushing to fix problems prematurely often creates more issues than they solve. When possible, pause before acting, gather more information, and consult others. Trust the process rather than seeking shortcuts. Honor commitments at work and in relationships, even when it's challenging. Set up reminders or structures to keep your promises. Regularly review your commitments to ensure they align with your values and goals. Recognize that every decision has consequences, sometimes unintended. Before acting, imagine all possible outcomes, anything that could happen. Seek counsel, especially from those who may be affected by your decisions. Embrace growth and change. Don't be afraid to redefine your professional identity as you learn and develop. Embrace change and redefining yourself as you progress. Seek new responsibilities that match your evolving identity. Become and think what you want to be, not what you were or where you're at right now. Think ahead. Genesis 15 through 17 teaches us about trust, patience, honoring commitments, considering the long-term impact of our choices, and embracing personal growth. In everyday and professional life, these translate into setting clear goals, practicing patience, be accountable, analyzing outcomes, consulting others, and continually transforming ourselves. It is amazing how each story echoes the same problem-solving techniques and decision-making process. Each story comes at it from a different angle. Reading these stories over and over is practice for your brain to connect how these processes fit together and becomes your first response instead of regretting later what you should have done. Be happy with your choices and your decisions. Remember, you too can have a new identity and new possibilities. Take God's hand and walk with Him. Trust. I'm Merrill, and this is Battlegram. Join me for the next episode and share this with someone that needs hope, help. Just some reassurance that they're following the right path. We'll see you later.